part of the section, which is going to be the requirements for living organisms. And I'm going to go quickly through this because this should be somewhat of a review for you from your biology classes, but I do want to make sure that I go over this. So let's talk about the major requirements of living organisms. There are 5 major requirements. There's water, food, oxygen, heat, and pressure. Now, if I were to ask you what are the requirements of living things, I think you probably would come up with the first 3 without a problem. You would definitely come up with those 3. And if you really sat and thought about it, you might come up with the heat. Now, pressure is the one that people usually don't think of. So I'm going to just take a little bit of time here, the last bit of this lecture, and explain in detail how these 5 requirements, why are they requirements? What's so important about them to the human body? The first one is going to be water. Now, why is water so important? Water is a very, very interesting molecule. It doesn't act like any other molecule that we know of. And without it, we wouldn't be here. Life needs water. There's a reason why when they're looking for life on other planets, they're looking for evidence of water. And if they find evidence of water, they know that at some point life could have existed there. Now, why is water so important? Well, water has something that we talked about, you should have talked about in your biology classes called polarity. It's a very polar molecule. And what that means is it's like a little tiny magnet where you have a slightly positive charge on one side and a slightly negative charge on the other. And that magnet is going to attract to other magnets. So water is really good at attracting to itself, and it's also really good at attracting to other things. So because of that, it helps our bodies run. So why? So first off, it's used in all metabolic reactions. Without water, all of the functions in your body can't exist. We learned about hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis, right? In order for molecules to form together into larger molecules, you need to have a dehydration synthesis reaction where you pull water out. And in order to break molecules, you need hydrolysis, which is adding water to that molecule. So if I have, for example, a carbohydrate, which is made up of many individual monosaccharides, something like, for example, a fructose molecule or any large starch or anything like that, what you need water to break that down. You also need water for transportation. As I said before, water is very polar, so it attracts to things. So your blood is mostly water, and the water in your blood allows for the transport of things like sugar and salts and minerals, and all those things get carried around your body. Now, not everything is water soluble, right? Some things like fats, you need other molecules, and we'll talk more about that later. But for the most part, water is necessary for transporting things through your blood. And then finally, we need water as a temperature regulator. Water is an excellent heat sink. It absorbs heat and it holds onto it. And it's because of the fact that the bonds between water molecules, those hydrogen bonds, they're wide and they can hold a lot of energy. It's why water becomes less dense when it freezes. Those hydrogen bonds separate. So water can hold on to a lot of heat before the temperature goes up. So what that does is it keeps our body at a nice even temperature. It takes a lot to raise your body temperature and it takes a lot to lower it. Your body's able to hold on to that heat because of that water. And of course, if you've ever done any exercise, you know that you sweat and that cools you down, right? Sweating is a really important part of our physiology. It's actually one of the things that allowed us to become what we are. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through. The next requirement is food. And as we all know, we get hungry throughout the day. And the reason why is we have a very high energy demand. Humans are extremely high energy demand because of our brains and because of the fact that we have to warm ourselves. We're warm-blooded. So all mammals have high energy demands because it takes energy to heat yourself. Animals like, for example, reptiles that are cold-blooded, they don't need to eat as much because they warm themselves with the sun. We don't need to do that. We actually heat ourselves up internally by our muscles contracting, but that takes a lot of energy. Also, we need to break that food down to make ATP, right? So that ATP gets used throughout the body and that's that process that you learned about in your biology classes called cell respiration. You need that glucose as that fuel source, and we get that from our food. And also, all those nutrients that we eat. One of the things I'm going to talk a lot about in here is nutrition. I'm very passionate about nutrition. It's something that our society, I don't think, pays enough attention to, and a lot of our health problems are actually due to our diets. And in order to get the proper nutrients to make your body run, you need to get them from your food. That's really the only place you can get them. So I know you could take supplements, but I'm talking about basic food here. So that's food. Oxygen. If you hold your breath for more than 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes is more realistic. You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to start breathing because our body needs a constant supply of oxygen, and the reason why is because of this thing over here. And you probably are getting horrible flashbacks of biology class, but this is the electron transport chain. The entire reason why we need oxygen, the only reason why we need oxygen, is because of this step right here. In order for us to keep this process going, in order for this pump, this ATP synthase, to keep spinning, we need to make sure that the hydrogen atoms do not hit equilibrium. We have to make sure that we get rid of the excess hydrogen as it passes from the exterior part of the membrane into the interior part of the membrane of the mitochondria. And the only way to keep that going is to keep getting rid of that excess hydrogen. And that's where that oxygen comes in. So the only reason why we need oxygen is because of cell respiration. But I'm sure you know that's extremely important. The next requirement is heat. Now, our body has to maintain a set temperature, and we're going to talk more about that in a later lecture. You're probably aware the human body temperature is around 98.6 degrees. Well, actually, I got news for you. Over the last, I don't know how many years, our body temperature average has actually gone down. Everybody in this, who's listening to this lecture right now, if you were to take your body temperature, it's not going to be 98.6. It's actually probably going to be a little closer to 97. And that is because our body temperature has been going down. Now, there's a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions on that, and we can get into that in a discussion during class. But really the main reason why our body has to be a certain temperature is that is the temperature at which our enzymes are the most productive. As you know from biology class, enzymes are made of proteins. And if the temperature is too low, they work too slowly. And if the temperature is too high, they denature and fall apart. So in our body, 98.6 degrees is the body temperature that our enzymes are the most productive and the most effective. And if your body temperature goes too high or too low, those enzymes can't do their job. Also, our body heat comes from, as I said earlier in this lecture, it comes from our muscles contracting. When you're cold, how do you warm up? Your body shivers, right? Your muscles contract. Your muscles are constantly going. And we'll talk about that when we get to the muscular system, how it's able to do that. But some part of your muscle and every part of your body is going to be contracting all the time. And that's to keep your body temperature where it needs to be. They're like little engines keeping your body warm. And that's why we get hungry, especially when it's cold out. In the winter, you start to crave heavier foods. That's because you need, more energy to keep your body warm. And finally, we have our last requirement, which is pressure. And we're going to finish up here. And pressure there's actually two types of pressure. There's atmospheric pressure and there's hydrostatic pressure. Atmospheric pressure is the pressure of the atmosphere pushing down on us. And it's actually a very important part of how we breathe. So atmospheric pressure is the force exerted against the surface by the weight of the air above that surface. So what does that mean? It's the air pushing down on you. And as you go higher up in the atmosphere, that pressure decreases. That is why it's harder to breathe the higher up you go. There's less oxygen, yes, that's true, but also the pressure is going to be lower and you're going to have a harder time breathing. And I'll explain when we have a discussion a little bit more about how it works. But just know that in order for you to breathe, you need to have atmospheric pressure. And when you go out into areas of the atmosphere that have less pressure, it's much harder to breathe. And then finally, hydrostatic pressure is the force exerted by a fluid. That 100% has to do with your blood. Your blood is mostly water, and in order for blood to pass through your blood vessels, you need a high enough blood pressure. That is why when you go to the doctor, they take your blood pressure. If it's too high, that can cause some problems, and we're going to talk about that. But if it's too low, that's also dangerous because that means there's not going to be enough force pushing blood through your body. Think of it this way. You have one heart in the middle of your body, and somehow that one heart, it has to pump blood through every blood vessel. You don't have a heart in your feet, and somehow that blood has to get pushed with enough force that it goes all the way down to your feet and then back up against gravity. That is a very hard thing to accomplish, and it's able to be accomplished with the heart being an unbelievably impressive muscle and the blood pressure being where it needs to be. So just to make sure we understand, atmospheric pressure is the atmosphere allowing oxygen to go into your lungs, and hydrostatic pressure is the pressure of blood pushing against your blood vessels and then transporting blood through your body. Thank you very much, and let me know if you have any questions in class. Have a great day.